Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And just a little bit of a disclaimer, after 2.5 years, I got COVID. And so it's settled, of course, into my vocal cords. And so I sound a little bit different, but that's okay. You're not listening to listen to me. You're here to listen to my guests. And so please join me in welcoming Mark Havener to our program today. Welcome, Mark. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. I definitely don't have COVID, and I'm sitting comfortably with a voice that works.
Perfect. I love it. So that means you can give us all sorts of great insight. So let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this. So Mark Havener is a marketing and communication strategist with a specialized focus on brand and executive thought leadership, strategic content development, and corporate communication strategies. He has more than 20 years of experience aligning messages with business goals and developing myriad communication vehicles and message strategies for a lengthy roster of clients. He started a consultancy in 2021, focusing on industry leadership communications and marketing. He is also the co-founder of Renovata. So again, Mark, welcome.
Thank you for having me. This is wonderful to be here. Nice to meet you. We chatted so much before we started recording.
I know.
Like
I always say that I should start the recording before then because that's when the real nuggets come out, right?
Right.
Well, what I always like to start with is to have my guests tell us how they got to where they are today. So how is it that you discovered that this is your passion in life?
It's been a journey, that's for sure. I never imagined that I would be running my own, business, and I never imagined that I would be focused on this quarter of the business world. But I started in kind of a scrappy marketing role in retail. Actually worked with Whole Foods Market mostly, getting their magazine displays together. And if you've ever been to Whole Foods and you see that their magazine displays look different than your normal grocery store,
right?
That's by design, because we used to do demographic analysis of the neighborhood and then determine, which magazines would sell best. And then from there, I ended up working at an agency for almost 15 years as an integrated marketing communications firm. And during that time, I spent not knowing what publicity was into becoming an executive in communications. And so it was a great journey with this fantastic firm. But I also started feeling a little antsy towards the end of my tenure there because I was seeing that a lot of the strategies, the tactics that we were using with clients simply weren't working anymore. And agencies, not just ours, but across the board, were having a difficult time navigating. And this was really when I would say about 3 or 4 years ago, when things just started changing so much in the communications landscape. Very difficult for people to keep up. And I found that because I was in an agency, I was really constrained in what I could actually do for clients, because we had things like billable hours, and we had, scopes of work and things that, we were required to do. Had a contract, and the contract stipulated what we were supposed to be working on. Whether or not that helped them in the least was sort of beside the point. We were also guided by their strategies, client strategies. The really good clients would listen to us and we could be partners and advisors, but most of the time we were just workhorses.
They would say, no, you're supposed to do 5 press releases this month.
Right. And where are our placements? And I would be in a position where it's like, well, okay, let's say we can talk more about this later, but I mean, the idea that we can get you the placement, but is that actually helping you?
Right.
And you're spending all of these billable hours on something that I don't know that is what you need. So I got a little disenchanted with the whole thing. And decided to start off on my own, really focusing on tactics I knew would work. Well, I should say strategies that I knew would work. But those strategies require a much more integrated posture with the clients. And so it's not like an agency who can take on a bunch of clients. It really is, I just can take on the 1 or 2 and really work on your business. And that's the model I've been on. And And since then, it's expanded into a new enterprise where I have a business partner now, and Renovata is formed, and we're now doing some really interesting work. And the journey was really just, finding my way through all of this.
I love it. And I've been doing public relations and marketing for way too many years. And it really is incredible how things have changed. I mean, when I originally started doing PR, that was back when we still printed the press release, printed a copy of the photo, and sent it, and all of these things. And it was about developing relationships with reporters. And, whether it was a news outlet, an industry pub, whoever. And, and we also wrote white papers, things like that. And of course, it evolved as technology evolved. You emailed things. I had one news director at a TV station say if I couldn't pitch them something on Twitter, it was too long. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really hard for me.
What about the details?
I know. And that was when Twitter was really, really short. It still is short, but yeah, it was really short then. And it was all about, we have the greatest fill in the blank in the world, and you should buy it.
Right.
And, and it was never, we didn't really give thoughts to, is it something they really need? Is it something they really want? What purpose is it serving besides we just want to sell X number of things, either for our clients or for the company that we were with? And it really, as you were saying, has evolved into so much more, because people now, we have the know, like, trust thing, which is obviously very important. But more than anything, people want to buy from companies that maybe have the same goals, have the same vision. And that's very hard for these old school type of CEOs and C-suite folks to even understand.
Right. Yeah. And so much of communications during my formative years was about positioning the company so that it sounded good, or the product so that it sounded good. And obviously this is something your audience would want to hear. And there was never any consideration or thought into, well, is this newsworthy? And then if it is this something that we need to communicate through the media? And because I think what happened with the media is they got really sick of it, especially during the pandemic. It was, well, as I'm talking as if it's over, but it started the pandemic where it was, we actually had some hard news to deal with here, people. And I'm pitching them about some widget, and the media was like, come on.
Dying.
This is not the time. And so then we would say, oh, okay, well, maybe we need a program to help, first responders or whatever it is. And then, the media is still saying, come on, this isn't about you. And there it is. Right. It isn't about you. It's about, and so when companies start thinking about externally about what they're doing for the world, for the community, for their customers, whatever it is, and make it about them, then we're talking. That's something that we can build communications around.
Right. And we credit or blame the millennials for this, wanting to either work for companies that have the same goals or buy from them, things like that. And I always laugh and I tell the people who are complaining to me about it, you understand, y'all raised them. I mean, and that is true, because I think, I'm at the tail end of baby boomer, and it was very consumer buy type of things. And we looked at that and went, well, maybe that's not quite what we should be doing. Maybe you should get a job with a company that feeds your soul. Maybe you should be buying from a company that is sustainable, all of these things. And so then, of course, the little millennials went okay, that's what we're going to do. But then it became expected of everybody. When my mother, who is 90 years old, will only support companies that are doing things that are made in America, I mean, I think that's a very telling feature.
Yeah, it's just well, I mean, we have infinite choices as consumers, and so you can't. You have to some way filter that for yourself. And so if you can find somebody that's aligned with not only what you think is important, but your personal values, then it gets much easier. Then you could just reject all of the other stuff as noise and just focus on that. And we do that as consumers. And I in Gen X, and Gen X, we became really interested in lifestyle as a badge. And so, we would have the posters in our dorms, and then, that translated into MySpace, if you remember that, where we would post things on MySpace to reflect who we are. But we do that with brands. I purchase things publicly so that people can see what my values are. And it's almost a lifestyle badge. So if you are a brand and you're trying to reach me, you better share my values. But now it's not just Gen X. Now it's everybody. Everybody's thinking like that.
Yeah. And some companies have always done that. I think Volvo is one of those companies that I always think of, because they knew they were marketing to mothers. And that was exactly what their sales pitch was it's safe, it's secure, all of these various things. Or Jeep, if you want to look at the other end of the spectrum, Jeep was for the people who were going four-wheeling and all of that. And they never tried to mix things. And I think that's been the problem with so many companies, is they want to be everything to everyone. And, I'm sure you have this happen. I have this happen. I ask somebody, who's your target market? And they smile sweetly at you and they say, everyone.
Everyone who is living on this planet.
And maybe even if they're an alien, we can sell to them too.
When you say that means you don't have an understanding what your own values are. Right. Because you can't possibly have the same values as everybody. And when I say value-based communications, I'm not necessarily talking about personal values, although that can play into it. I'm talking about, what is it that you're doing? What is your purpose? And how is it fixing somebody's problem? And that somebody, that's your target market. And so if Jeep is a great example. One of my favorites is Dawn. They're really good at this. Even in the 80s, when you see the commercial, you had other soap commercials, but Dawn was always about like the mom sitting down on the couch with the family, not about washing the dishes.
Right. Or
Why
the ducks. The ducks that had oil and grease on them, right?
Right. Yeah. So there's two channels there. The first one is Dawn makes you a better mother. Because you're not spending all your time washing dishes, right? You can spend time with your family. But the other one is Dawn makes you a better person, because look at, you're saving the world, right? And that's value-based communications, and that's very targeted and very well done. But if you just have, I might go on a tangent here, but we're having an acquisition crisis in marketing right now, and everybody's blaming Apple for this because of the updates on the phones. Now Facebook can't do all of the targeting that they used to be able to do.
Oh, gee.
So sad. And but the acquisition costs have gone through the roof, because we were all riding this gravy train of saying, okay, well, I can target on Facebook and then everybody will see my thing. Right. And now that we can't do that, people are saying, oh, I can't bring in customers anymore. And it's because your marketing has never been about the customer. If your acquisition costs are high, that's why.
Right.
It's not about, if it's about the problem you're solving and the value that you bring to them, then acquisition doesn't have to be that high.
Right. Because you went to the people who are actually going to hopefully buy your product or service, as opposed to this shotgun approach where you're hoping somewhere out there you might hit somebody. Right.
Exactly. And that's doubly true with PR, because when I talked a few moments ago about, does this even fit your business strategy? What I'm talking about is that, if you get the cover of Fast Company for your widget, you get the dream placement.
Right.
And so the Fast Company puts you on the cover, and you're sitting there looking like some scrappy entrepreneur with your Dockers on, and you're leaning against the desk. And you're going to have that framed in your office probably. It's the hit of the lifetime.
Right.
What does it actually do for your business? What does it actually do? Now, it definitely gives you credibility. And so if you're looking for investing or fundraising or that kind of thing, it definitely helps there. But it's one and done, isn't it? I mean, how many Fast Companies can you have?
Right.
And so if you're focused on this as your channel, I mean, what purpose does it serve for your business? And media is really, really difficult, because you really have to understand that the stories that get placed really don't have much to do with buying and selling. It's not a commerce tactic.
Right.
It's credibility, it's awareness. and so when you are paying an agency to do this, and your mindset is, oh, this is going to help my business. Well, what part of your business is it going to help? Because I find a lot of startups will want that big, fast company story, thinking that's going to propel their business, when really all it is a footnote in your overall business strategy. And so you might dump $60,000 to get that placement, and then what happens when that money should have been in cultivating a community around what you believe. And then you have, you know, an audience that you can grow. And that's just an example of sort of the 20th century thinking that's happening in the C-suite still.
Right. Yeah. I worked with a client years ago. She wrote this book, great book, you know, and this was back when Oprah still had her book of the month. And so she hires me to do public relations. And I said, okay, let's talk about your goals. I want to be on Oprah. Okay, let's talk about your goals before then.
Right.
And she had none. I mean, that was her goal. And so she wanted to go from 0 to 100 or more, you know, just boom, like that. And so I tried to tell her, okay, first of all, I was in Denver. So that's a major media outlet. I said, let's get you interviewed here first. I mean, you know, this was, you know, long enough ago that there were just the 4 TV stations. There were 2 newspapers at that point. Yay. And, you know, I don't even remember how many radio stations, but we could have gotten her on a lot of things. And I said, and this was before they talked about that lovely little thing called social proof. But we were going to have her book of, you know, I've done this, and then we could go bigger, and then we could go bigger. And at some point, maybe pitch her to Oprah. And she looked at me and she said, I'm only going to pay you to get me on Oprah. And I went, and I said, okay, so say I can wave my magic wand and I can get you on Oprah. This is also before Amazon. And so when you printed a book, and especially if you self-published, you had 20,000 copies of it in your garage, you know, right? Because you were going to be the fulfillment house. And so I said, okay, so we get you on Oprah. She loves your book, and you get orders for 30,000 books overnight. Can you do that? And I said, do you see why you ramp up? You know, and we obviously did not work together because she had that one goal and refused to think of any other way to get there. And I think you're right. You know, people see the cover of Fast Company. They see being on Oprah, you know, having, say, Kim Kardashian talk about your product or your service. And they forget that there's all of these other steps that have to take place. And maybe even those things aren't important at all. I mean, you know, does it make sense for Kim Kardashian to talk about your product? Maybe, maybe not. More than likely not, right? You know, and so that's where communications is such a tricky thing now.
Absolutely. That's a really great example. I have a similar one, actually about a book as well. The idea that going in with a media placement as a goal is not a goal.
Right.
Media placements are tactics that should serve another goal. And case in point, and this is going to make me look bad, but I'm going to tell the story anyway because it's a real zinger. There was an individual had a really great book that was about his recovery from traumatic brain injury and how Route 66 was the catalyst for that. The culture around Route 66, the people along the route, etc.
Driving across the U.S.
Right, and it was a beautiful book. And so the media strategy was to get him on the morning shows on all of the major markets along Route 66. Which there are many, starting with LA, there's going into Albuquerque all the way to Chicago. So and we did a great job. We had them placed, I think, on at least 6 or 7 morning shows, and all in major markets, all along Route 66. And it was a great story. Everything went as planned. Huge media tour. He sold 2 books.
Oh no.
And it was a tragedy. It was a complete failure of a business strategy because there was no goal beyond just getting those placements,
right?
You know, and if the goal was sales, we would have had partnerships with bookstores. We would have done other things, but yeah, I mean, that's it. And so when I hear clients say, I want in Bloomberg, my question is, okay, why? Why? Well, because they usually say credibility, awareness, or what's the third thing they usually say? Business.
Right.
So I want more business. I want more credibility. I want more awareness. And so the first question on awareness is awareness that you exist. Yeah. Or is it about what you stand for? and if it's about what you stand for, is Bloomberg the right choice? If it's credibility, is that for what? If it's business, is that for what? And so when you start asking hard questions about business strategy, sometimes Bloomberg isn't the answer. I would say a lot of times it's not, because many times when you're talking like this, you haven't, as you said, done the work to get there. So Bloomberg isn't going to care, and neither are their readers. So you have to start making yourself important enough for the media to care. So I like to take a strategy where you are, instead of chasing the media, you're building yourself up to become such a force or an entity that the media comes to you.
Right.
And that's a much longer journey, but it's about community building. And it's about having a platform, something you believe in, communicating about that platform relentlessly to your audience. And then that greases the skids when you start talking to media. Now you have something to talk about.
Right. And the term now that everybody uses is influencer, and we used to call them experts,
right?
But now, they are influencers. And my problem with influencers is, are they authentic influencers, or have they been paid? As we record this, it's been about a month. And it's funny, I laugh about the Kardashians, where one of the Kardashians got in trouble. She had done a tweet about cryptocurrency and did not disclose that she was being paid by them. Now, the funny thing is, she's normally really good about that. So I'm not quite sure, and I'm sure she has people, but, and ended up with a $1 million+ fine. I mean, this was an expensive oopsie daisy, but it is, we lose the authenticity when, and we've had paid pitch people for years. I think they were, somewhere I saw that Michael Jordan was probably one of the first really big paid pitch people. But so we've had them for so many years, but I always do stop and think, okay, does Michael Jordan really wear those shoes? Now, he probably did. But I laugh at, the like Jennifer Aniston for a mid-level type of cosmetic. I don't think she probably uses that. Or the ones that, anytime you've got a celebrity, a spokesperson, whoever, who your immediate thought is, I don't think they use that, then to me, they've lost all credibility, and it's not going to matter what they say, even if I like them.
Yeah. The influencer marketing has become, I don't know, such a trap, I think, for a lot of CMOs and communications people, because they view it as an ad, but an ad with a little bit more pull than your standard ad.
Right.
So they're okay with dropping 20 grand on a Paris Hilton tweet. We actually had access to Paris Hilton on one program, and instead of doing that, what we did was create kind of a funny skit-like program with her, which got a lot more play. If it's going to be an ad, treat it like an ad. Do the right work to make that happen. But authenticity is key, and I think when you use authenticity, people see it as a buzzword. And the C-suite, they want to appear authentic.
Right.
But I think it's doing the work to make sure it is authentic. The best way to do that is to understand what your values are. What is your business value? What is your platform? What are you about? What are you after? And then find people that align with that value. Then you're authentic.
Right.
When you see these brands get in trouble for, say, greenwashing or pinkwashing or any kind of washing, it's because they haven't built that as part of the brand identity. And so when they're just playing lip service. And so when some cause-oriented marketing goes out, people are like, that's totally disingenuous. You're a fill in the blank. But if you are a brand that has built that as part of your identity, that you have been clear about what your platform is, and there's a cause that naturally aligns to it, you don't have to wonder. Right. And if somebody comes at you over social media over it, you can say, look, this is who I am. And you have the receipts.
Right.
And so cause marketing is a bad word, because usually it's a layer on top of something that has no purpose.
Right. Right. And of course, I think now we look for ways to find somebody being inauthentic or dishonest. And then of course it just goes berserk with all of our various social media. And so it is hard. I mean, if you are a company that, says, okay, hey, we're very sustainable, then you do have to back that up. There's no fudging, there's no whatevers. If your company is you, or maybe you're the CEO, then same thing. Your values have to match. We see things a lot with social issues, where a company might have, they might say, hey, we're very diverse, we're very, all of the words that we're supposed to be, but then their C-level, their owners aren't. And and it comes back and it bites them. And a great example is, I'm here in Atlanta, and I like Chick-fil-A. I really do like Chick-fil-A. But sometimes he is actually just chairman of the board now. I don't think he has much to do with day-to-day decisions, but he's, not real strong on LGBTQ issues. In fact, he has been known to be very anti. And so that carries over into the business perspective. And so when you have the business saying, hey, we are very diverse, but our upper management believes something different, it's difficult.
Yeah, we see it across the board, and it's usually legacy thinking. Like Amazon's a good example of this. I saw a campaign. I don't know if this was a national campaign, but it was hitting my Hulu about how much they pay their employees.
Right.
We're $15 an hour, in some places more. And I'm thinking, come on. I mean, your CEO is the poster child for all that is wrong in this world, to a lot a lot of people. Right. And when it comes to this issue, I mean, you say what you will about Bezos, but he's not a workers guy. He's just not. And we all know that. And so when you put out a campaign like that, it's just a slap in the face to what you're trying to do. I mean, if I were in charge of that comms, I would be talking about the efforts that we are going to do to change how our system is in Amazon, because it is deeply embedded, and I'm sure that there is a desire to improve it. So what are we doing? Here's the committee that we're forming. These are the people on the committee. This is why we chose them. This is the work we're doing. These are our goals and our milestones we're going to do to get there. Now you have a communications program built on an honest effort to change how things are in Amazon. Right. And then we stop caring so much about what Bezos is doing.
Right. Yeah, because it is about the company, as opposed to, and I don't care if you're an Elon Musk, a Bezos, Bill Gates, whoever. It does come down to the company. I tell people, I like Chick-fil-A. I'm going to go buy Chick-fil-A. I order from Amazon practically every day, even though I don't like some of the things that they do. Part of it is, okay, it's easier. It's, all of those things too. And that's okay too. Recognizing that the consumer might not actually care about those issues, and they just want to know, I'm going to get it in one day. I think that was one of the biggest uproars that I remember hearing during the pandemic, during especially the initial shutdown, was we no longer had Amazon next day, right? and holy schmoly, were we spoiled, and here in Atlanta, and probably out in LA too. I mean, there were things we could get in 4 hours.
Oh, sure.
And so when all of a sudden the world shut down, and what do you mean I can't get my Amazon tomorrow? And that was, I didn't care about Bezos. I just wanted my Amazon right then. And so that should have been their campaign was, okay, folks, because we care about the health and safety of our workers, we can't do next day.
Right.
And then we would have all gone, okie dokie.
Yeah. Right. That's exactly right. If that's what you actually care about. Right. So that's the thing. They don't actually care about that. So they're not going to do it. And that's what we mean by authenticity. Right. And it's it's lipstick on a pig. We've talked about this for generations. But we're seeing it enforced now. And what we have that other generations haven't is ready and full access to all of human knowledge at our fingertips. Right. And so you can't get away with this anymore. These are table stakes.
Right. And of course, the bad part is things that happened a long time ago come back and bite you. And, people don't always notice when they're sharing posts, all of these various things, that this, was a while ago. I had a friend who was head of communications for Hewlett Packard. And somewhere, and this was a while ago, probably 5-6 years ago at least. In fact, she's no longer there, but there was, a thing that went around Facebook, and I'm sure Twitter and everything else at the time, that talked about someone who was deployed, so a military person, and wherever they were, their Hewlett Packard printer broke, and HP refused to ship them a replacement. So of course everybody's up in arms. Oh my gosh, this man's off at war and yada 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 yada. Well, of course, couldn't be anywhere farther from the truth. Not only was it, a very old post, HP had made it good. They had actually changed their policy so that, if you were in the military, they had a different return policy. I mean, all sorts of things. But, it got a whole bunch of bad PR before people started going, wait. And then, of course, what happened was we just went on to the next thing where we all got up in arms.
Right. Yeah, the cycle is nuts now. But one thing I maintain is that as long as you are communicating consistently with your values as a company, and what I mean by values are, if your value is Amazon about, let's say your values are about making your people thrive. And so that they can have the life that they want as an Amazon employee. Let's say that's one of your values. As long as those are your values, and as long as you're communicating around those values, it doesn't matter if you step in it or not, because you can always back up and say, no, this is what I believe. And if you don't have your values established, now you might very well have values, but you haven't sat down in a room with other stakeholders and said, okay, how are we going to formalize these values and communicate them internally and externally? And how are we, and that informs business strategy too. Is that what business are we going to choose to do or not to do because of these values? And how are we going to move these, move our intent through the society that we live in? If you've done that work, social media isn't going to hurt you. Because you're always consistent with who you are. Even if people don't like who you are, that's okay. We're not for you. Not everybody needs to be wearing Crocs. It's fine. Croc wearers wear Crocs. You don't want to wear Crocs. That's fine. And you need to be okay with that. That's part of target marketing. It's not who do I want to buy my product. Who shares my values, and how can I help them create a community around what we do. And that's the approach, which is. I'm afraid not what people like Amazon are doing.
Yeah. And let's be honest, they don't care. Because I'm still going to order every day. Right. And the other part of PR is also kind of building that good bank so that when things go wrong, because they do, the people you've got kind of that bank of trust already built up. You've got your supporters, and I think now more than ever, that's critical. If you do something wrong and somebody posts on Facebook, TikTok, wherever, you don't want to be the as the company saying, well, wait, you want your thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who love you saying, now wait a minute.
Exactly. Right.
Because the company's going to say, well, wait, but if my neighbor, if the 5,000 people that all those things, if they say, now wait a minute, they are a good company. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again, you get those people by being clear about your values. And I want to exercise that I think everybody should do. And I harp on this a lot. So anybody who follows me will hear me say this, but you really need to define your purpose. What is it you're trying to do and why? Right. Because too many companies come in and say, what I'm trying to do is make more money or improve my profit margin or get more clients or whatever that is. And yes, okay, that's
right. Yeah, we need that or we don't function. We get that.
Of course you are. But beyond that, why are you trying to do that? And if you can't answer that without the word me or I or the company, then you need to reevaluate what you're doing. The purpose of what you're doing should be something that helps your customers, helps your community, helps your country, helps your world, whatever it is. It needs to do something outside of your organization. And I think that's the big difference between what I would call business leadership and industry leadership. Business leadership is focused on the business, industry leadership focused on the industry. Right. And so if you're out there every day working on fixing the industry, you're automatically going to get all of the attention you want, good and bad. But you do that because you've defined what your purpose is. What is about the industry that I'm trying to fix, and that alone is going to put you miles ahead over a whole bunch of other business leaders. Right.
Yeah. As you were talking, I Googled Walmart mission. And originally, when Sam founded the company, the mission was making a difference in the lives of our customers. Okay.
Pretty solid. Yeah.
Yeah. And now, and I like this. I mean, they've refined it. We're helping communities save money and live better all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, they know who their market is. There are many people who, for whatever reason, will not go into Walmart. Whatever. But for those who are, they're going there to save money. They're going there because it's easy. I mean, all of these various things, and living better. Well, hey, that's a pretty good thing. Now, again, people will fuss and they will say, okay, they don't pay minimum wage. They treat their employees poorly. They make me do self-checkout.
Yeah.
But right, I'm like, okay, you got to pay me if I'm going to check my stuff out. But it's they've been very clear on that, and they've never tried to compete against Macy's, Nordstrom's, all of those things. That they knew that was not going to be where they wanted to be.
Well, they've identified their role too, which is that they are a hub of communities, which they very much are, especially in rural communities. And that's they've identified that they don't have an obligation necessarily to customers, but to the community that they're in.
Right.
And that transcends a lot of things. It also informs a lot of programs that they perpetuate and work on. And that's their focus isn't necessarily on their internal culture, although I would argue that they should focus on that, but that's because that's not where their dividends are. Their dividends are making the overall community stronger. And so to do that, they have to make certain business decisions, but they can back that up. They have receipts. They say, look, you may not like what we pay our employees, but the reason we do it this way is because we have to keep our prices low because we are a hub of a community and people rely on us. And that is a narrative that they can push because against adversity. And that's it. I mean, we shouldn't be, as brands, afraid of people not liking what we do. And if we are, that means that maybe we haven't identified why we're doing it. Maybe we're insecure.
Right. Yeah. And or we're just trying to, as I said, hit, use the shotgun to try and hit something.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that so many companies miss is they might have their purpose, and it might even be on the wall. Right. But the employees don't believe it, don't buy into it. So how do we deal with that disconnect?
Well, I would examine, first of all, if the employees aren't buying into it, are they not buying into the purpose, or are they not buying into the fact that the purpose is real? Because I've been with companies before that put their mission, vision, value on walls, and I look and scoff. And I work for a telecom company, and I was like, oh, come on, I'm a lead in the customer service department. I know for a fact this isn't how you think,
right?
And so who's going to know you're inauthentic more than your employees? And so you really need to be authentic about your purpose, and that purpose needs to create an internal culture that supports that purpose. And you do that from the top down, but it only works if it's true.
Right.
And so there's that. Then there's also the employees that maybe aren't aligned with your purpose. And so they, and I think cultivating a culture around your purpose, and that transcends everything. That should determine what your HR looks like. It should determine what your comms looks like. It should determine what your operations look like. Because if you are, like, for example, we represented a sprinkler company whose whole purpose was really on water conservation, which seems a little odd for a sprinkler company. But if you think about it, it's like, well, actually, that's something
the perfect thing for them to be doing.
They should be thinking about that. And it's not just lip service. They created R&D to support this. And so, if they weren't doing the R&D and it was just lip service, that's one thing. But let's say you are, working for this company and you don't share that purpose. Well, was there enough work done on the internal culture to make it clear to people coming in and out that this is what you're about? Because really creating a team in support of your purpose should be paramount. I think, and Gen Z is teaching us this lesson right now, but I think companies need to spend a whole lot of time thinking about what their internal culture is.
Right.
And making sure that everybody is aligned around it, or if not, maybe you shouldn't be with this company.
Right. Well, and I think we really saw that in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Where, you all of a sudden were not in the office. And did your corporate culture disappear? And all of these various things. And I'm one of these now. I've home officed for years, but I'm also a believer that you get a lot of what you do in your business by those little random conversations at the coffee maker, all of these various things. And so when companies said, oh, we're just going to go totally work from home, then pretty soon they went, well, maybe that's not going to work. But I think, it really was where people examined what is this company standing for? If
Yeah.
they said, hey, one of our core values is family. But then when you had your 4 kids that you were trying to teach and do all of these various things, and you were in trouble for it, well, wait a minute, maybe family wasn't one of your core values. Or, flexibility. I mean, all of these various things. And because it happened worldwide, I think it really made those conversations just completely blow up. And it doesn't matter what generation you are, you went, maybe that's not where I want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a real, and to borrow a term, a come to Jesus, I think, for a lot of companies. They because they would propel this culture, but then when rubber met road, didn't actually deliver.
Right.
And I think the one of the biggest things I saw in corporate America, just across the board, was management having a difficult time understanding their role.
Right. Yeah. When
Because
their little people were no longer under their very proverbial thumbs, what do you
yes,
do?
how do you micromanage if you don't have anybody to micromanage? And so there was sort of a panic, and we saw it happen with like, no, we need to get back to the office now. And for what? I mean, I think that there is a lot to be said for cultivating culture in person, and I think there's ways to do that. But do I really need to, say I'm in LA, drive 45 minutes to an hour to an office and sit there wearing, business casual when I could just do it from home a lot quicker, a lot more efficiently, a lot more productively? And that's the big existential question of middle management is how do we have a role in all of this? And I can tell you what that role should be. It should be culture. How do your job as a manager is to cultivate culture. And so that doesn't mean micromanagement. That means setting up processes and systems, touch points, and really creating a culture of support for your people. And you become a resource and not a manager. And that change of mindset is almost being forced upon us by a generation that's just like, I don't need this.
Right.
I don't need this.
I have internet. I can work wherever.
Yeah. And I can work for myself. I don't have to work for you. I mean, the opportunities for Gen Z are unparalleled. They don't have the roots that older generations have. They don't have the responsibility. So they can just make a buck doing whatever they want. And they don't need our corporate culture. And so we have to make it attractive to them. And we have to respect boundaries and live the culture that we say we live. But yes, the pandemic taught us all of that. Real quick. And, I have to say, as one of the driving reasons why I set off on my own is because I felt constrained by the corporate structure, not by the agency in general. The agency was great, but that structure, that mindset.
Well, and we saw the companies who had a good grasp on it before the pandemic started, because then things went well, because we were working in an office on Friday and we were not working in an office on Monday, right? I mean, there was no time to prepare. And so the companies that already trusted their employees, all of those various things, were fine with it. I had a discussion with somebody who was really bothered, but he was definitely a micromanager. And he did not like that his employees were not where he could pop into their little offices at any point in time and see what was on their monitor. And I said, so you don't trust them to be doing the work? Well, no, I guess they're getting the work done. And I said, but no, you still don't trust them to be doing it. And he kind of hummed and hawed around. And I said, did you trust them when you could see them every day? And if the answer was no, then they shouldn't have been working for him. I mean, it was just, but if the answer was yes, then what's the difference? I mean, if you trusted them to get their work done when you could pop in on them, then you should trust them to get their work done when they're working in their basement.
Right. Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought up trust, because that's what it comes down to. There's a fear and distrust on that level about the teams. And when teams are empowered to own their own work, that means you're conveying that you trust them. And when you're checking in just as from a position of support, to make sure they get things done. If deadlines are missed, you check in to figure out how to fix the process, because your goal as a business leader is process and building, not doing and managing. And allow them to manage their own stuff. Then you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about that. But if you don't trust them, it's something to examine. It all comes down to that.
Right. And, and if you really were having to micromanage to make sure that they were getting the job done, there's a totally different issue. And maybe it was that you were micromanaging. I mean,
Yeah.
it could be
Yeah.
your fault as opposed to the employees. They might have been perfectly capable of doing it, but you felt that you had to be doing it. So it's, yeah, the COVID, and I think, we're still trying to find our way,
Sure.
out of this. Companies are trying hybrid, their, all of these various things. And I love the fact now that, when you see, say, commercials for Indeed and, all of those various hiring things, one of the things that they're talking about is remote working. And it
Mhm.
used to be that was only something that was really pretty uncommon. If telling somebody, hey, I'm going to work from home every Friday, they were like, no.
Right. If you
Because
do
we
that,
might need
everybody can
you.
do that.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like, well, I'm reachable by phone. I'm reachable, you can always, I have Zoom on all the time, whatever. I mean, all of these various things. So it's pretty easy to be knowing what's going on. But I talked with a young man the other day, and he's actually in his 30s. So this kind of surprised me. And I said, tell me a little bit about yourself. And in the last 6 years, he has been totally remote and has just moved from place to place to place. Now he's single, which
Mhm.
does make a difference. I mean, the second you start having kids that have to be in school, then things change a little bit. But he said, but now he's reached the stage where he wants to buy a home. He's
Mhm.
ready to settle down. Now he said he'll still probably be working remotely, but so he could work from, whoever. But he loved the freedom. He said, I'd be a month here, I'd be 6 months here. And he was a consultant, obviously, and he would just
Mhm.
kind of go where the work went. And I thought, that's, especially as a youngster, that would have been great.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And that's the opportunity that I think this next generation has
mhm,
is this idea that we don't have to be bound to a particular
right.
location or
Hmm.
company. And the economy is going to force our hand at some
Hmm.
point. But I think that there is a new mindset in the workforce, and it really is about empowering
Hmm.
your teams to do
Right.
what you hired them to do.
Hmm.
And if you are every minute plugged into what they're doing, you're a manager, you're not a
Hmm.
leader. And that's not that managers don't lead, but
Hmm.
that's a different tack.
Hmm.
And I think in this new culture, we find people
Hmm.
that are aligned with what we want.
Hmm.
They want it too. You give them the tools and the trust to do
Hmm.
it. If
Right.
it doesn't work, then
Hmm.
move on. But
Hmm.
we don't even give people the opportunity to fail,
Right.
and that's one of the biggest concerns I have
Hmm.
about leadership now is that people can't. If you're micromanaging and bailing people out all the time, and first of all, you're telling them that they can't. They need you to do a task. That's
Hmm.
first of all. So you are
Right.
inserting yourself as a bottleneck into
Hmm.
the business process. They need you to do a task. And the second thing you're teaching them is that you won't allow them to fail.
Hmm.
So they're afraid of failure.
Hmm.
And therefore they're going to rely on you for
Right.
everything. And that means
Hmm.
that's why you have busy email boxes, by the
Hmm.
way. And so, but if they do fail, that's okay. Your business isn't going to fall apart because
Right.
somebody made a mistake. I
Hmm.
mean, just like fix the process, fix the problem,
Hmm.
explain it to
Learn
them,
from
train them,
it.
learn from
Hmm.
it, and move on. Now, if they continue to fail on the same thing over and over, maybe they're not a right fit. But
Right.
we have to allow people to take ownership
Hmm.
of their successes and their failures,
Hmm.
and that's what I hope comes out of all of this.
Hmm. Right. And as you said, that comes back to what is the purpose? What are you in business to do?
Right.
Because once you know that, then okay, these people have to be in the office every day. It's just,
Mhm.
their function. They need to be there. And obviously we're not talking about, putting things together and, I'm not going to build a car in my garage. Well, I might, but, but yeah, once you know what that purpose is, then you really can start defining, here's how we can be hybrid. Here's how we can be total remote. Here's, all of those various things because it all ties together.
Right. And some might say, though, these are operation problems, Mark. Why are you talking about this? It all comes down to communications because
Hmm.
if we're going to create a communications platform and
Hmm.
be successful externally,
Hmm.
you have to get your house in order.
Right.
And a whole lot of work that I do with clients is really integrating into the organization
Hmm.
and trying to find out how, what are we doing really? What do we
Hmm.
stand for really? And,
Hmm.
and internal comms is just as important as external
Right.
comms. And internal comms doesn't work if you don't have your house in order.
Hmm.
So it's all connected. It really
Hmm.
is very integrated, all of these
Right.
problems.
Well, and I always tell people, your best salespeople is every single employee.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't think that somebody in the mailroom can, do something, because even if it's just, hey, tell me what you do. Tell me what your company does. You're at some big church banquet. Hey, what do you do? You don't want them to say, ugh, because that's immediately going to make that company look bad. But if they say, hey, I work for a great company, I'm in the mailroom, but it's a great company. I've got a lot of opportunity where I can move up. Maybe they want to stay in the mailroom. Who knows? But yeah, every single employee are your salespeople. And I think that's one of the things that so many people forget. So then they forget that internal communication.
Yeah.
I worked for a company one time where we went from being very good at communicating internally to not. And of course, what happened was when we weren't, people made it up. They're not telling us what's going on because,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, they came up with the worst case scenarios. And I also have spent time doing media training with people, and I tell them, you don't want the reporter to have that gap in there because they'll fill it in themselves also. So it's perfectly okay to say, I don't have the answer right now, but I'll get it for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And to say why. I mean, this is not something I thought about.
Right.
Thank you for bringing it up. That's, that kind of communications is key. And too often, I see this across the board too, is the C-suite wants to be very insular about what they communicate about. And so that creates an us and them sort of situation. But and companies, like some of the companies I'm working with now, are really great about this, about just telling you everything. It's like, look, this is what we're going through. This is what I think. This is what we're trying to deal with. And by the way, take the survey, tell us what you think. And that kind of back and forth communication is so good, because you're tearing down the walls and you're making sure that everybody understands we're all in this together. It's not an us and them.
Right. And now I think that's even more important than ever, especially if your workforce is everywhere, because you need to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, yeah, and that they have the freedom to talk to you about problems. That and they're not going to be. Everybody says, "Oh, we have an open door policy," but I've worked for companies that say that, but it's not true.
Right.
And
you go to that door and right.
Right. So, but just proactively bringing people into the conversation. One thing that I love about one of the companies I work with is drinks, and they have a really great in-house culture. But one of the things I love about them is that they will they will openly ask for feedback kind of on a regular basis, and then they will also communicate to the staff what's going on a daily basis. And that sort of back and forth, it means then that everybody has an equal voice, even if you are a Gen Z just starting out or a boomer has been there for a long time. You all get heard, and that not enough companies do that.
Right. Well, and then when you combine those, so you've got the Gen Z saying, well, what about if we use TikTok, and the baby boomer goes, the what's it?
Is that the thing with the dancing people?
Yeah, and so then that's where you have the opportunities to kind of have this learning from everybody, because the Gen Z people might not get the message that needs to be, but that the baby boomers are like, hey, here's what we need to tell people. Safety is the greatest thing. All of those various things. And so then when you have that combination and that collaboration, that's where the things are really going to go forward.
And you build an environment where it's safe to have that, where people aren't going to be shut down because they're too young, or shut down because they're not in this department, or shut down because they are remote and I'm not, or whatever. And that if it's an open forum like that, you're not going to take everybody's ideas, but everybody should be heard.
Right. Yeah.
And that's I think that's one of the key learnings we're getting out of this.
Right.
Out of this era.
Yeah, and now the big thing that they're talking about is what do they call it? The quiet resignation, where they're still working, but they're doing the bare minimum. And I don't, that's always been there. But I think now more so maybe than ever, because we don't have that communication. We're not seeing, hey, Mark might be struggling a little bit. Is there something we need to do to help him? All of these various things, because we don't see everybody every day. So when they're just putting in just the minimum, might look like it's okay, but in an office environment, you might have noticed.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there's two currents to that trend. One is that I'm just going to do the bare minimum because I don't believe in what I'm doing, and I'm going to check out until I find something better. I mean,
we're not talking about sabotaging either.
Right?
It's
No.
I'm going to do just the minimum.
Yeah, but the other current to that is I'm going to only do what I was hired to do.
Right.
And I think there are two different things going on because I'm seeing both narratives, but the expectations that organizations have on how much a person commits to the organization are too high. And we've cultivated as a society a culture where we're working on Saturdays or turning down family events for the purpose of the company is okay and admired.
Right.
And really it's not. And I think we're learning that boundaries are good and that we should respect those boundaries, and we should not make our employees work on the weekends if they don't have to. Right. And we should allow them to have the flexibility to be with their families. And so what's happening with the Great Resignation is that all of these people are leaving organizations, and so they're putting those roles on the people who stay behind. And so now they're doing twice the work for the same pay.
Yeah, for the same pay.
And that's when they're rolling. It's like, wait, nope, no, I'm going to check out at 5. I will see you on Monday morning.
Right.
And
that's not in my job description.
Right. And so both need to be addressed. They're two different problems that are happening simultaneously.
Right. And again, it does come back to being authentic, knowing what your purpose is, all of those various things, and obviously communication. It absolutely has to happen. Well, oh my gosh, Mark, we have been chatting for an hour. This has been fabulous. We definitely have to do it again because this was very interesting. But until then, tell us more about your company and what are the services that you provide.
I'm with Renovata, co-founded Renovata, which is a communications company. We really view ourselves as consultants more than as an agency.
Okay.
And our focus is really on the C-suite and getting communications lined up in an order. And that typically means finding purpose, creating the messaging track, but then also creating the downstream content that needs to come out to support that. So while it is sort of PR, it's really much more in a macro communications and involves everything from podcasts to op-eds and everything in between. Really thought leadership kinds of programming. And we're getting into production too. So, want to stick around with Renovata as we launch some really exciting podcasts and docuseries that we're developing. And this is a really exciting time for us right now. Very
cool. I love it. Well, how do they reach you?
I think renovata.vision is the best place at this point because all of our stuff is on there. I am on LinkedIn. That's the best place to reach me. Just look for Mark Havener. I think I'm the only one in the Western world named that. So you should be able to find me. And yeah, that's probably the best place at this point.
I love it. I love it. Well, Mark, this really has been fascinating. And like I said, we'll have you on again because this has been such a great discussion. But do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
I think that my biggest thought is we need to start thinking about our world in terms of uncertainty because that's not going away anytime soon. And so all of the topics we discussed today are about kind of rejecting this 20th century mindset for a new mindset. And the new mindset is about resiliency, making your people thrive, making sure your constituents thrive, and making change in the world.
I love it. Well, this really has been a delight. I'm Deb Creer. I have been having a wonderful conversation with Mark Havener from Renovata. All of a sudden, my COVID throat cropped up. And I look forward to the next time that we chat. And until then, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.